Can I have the leftovers, please? I haven't eaten in days. Judith's voice was barely louder than a whisper, but it sliced through the noisy restaurant like a blade. She stood at the counter, thin, barefoot, trembling. Her faded, ash-colored gown clung to her body, stained with dirt and dust. Her hair was wild and frizzy, as if it hadn't met a comb in weeks. Her face, though beautiful beneath the grime, was tired. And her eyes, those eyes held more pain than most people would know in a lifetime. The restaurant fell silent. Forks paused midair. Mouths stopped chewing. Conversations froze. Phones lifted, not to answer calls, but to record. Because something was happening. Something strange, humiliating, fascinating. Judith swallowed hard. Please, Ma, she added. Just leftovers. I'm not asking for money. Just what people didn't finish. Behind the counter stood Sandra, the manager. She looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. Her figure hugged tightly by an expensive Ankara gown, gold earrings swaying as she tilted her head, red lipstick sharp against flawless skin. Her wig was perfectly styled, her nails long and glossy. She had presence and power, the kind of woman who didn't just run the restaurant, but ruled it. And now, she was looking at Judith like she was something sticky on the sole of her shoe. Sandra's lips curled into a smile, one that was neither warm nor kind. It was the kind of smile wolves give before they bite. So, Sandra said, her voice loud enough to carry, you walked into my restaurant to beg for food? Judith nodded faintly. Just leftovers, Ma. I haven't eaten. I can clean. Wash plates. Anything. Sandra didn't move. Then, slowly, she raised her right foot and rested it on the edge of the counter, revealing a sharp black heel. If you want to eat today, she said, kiss my shoe. A collective gasp rippled through the restaurant. Someone laughed nervously. Another muttered, is this for real? A child asked her mother what was happening, but was quickly hushed. Judith blinked. She looked at the shoe, then at the faces watching. Some were amused, some disturbed, but none moved. Sandra leaned closer. You said you're not lazy, she said. Then prove it. Kiss my shoes. Use your tongue. Show us how bad you want it. Judith's lips trembled. Her knees weakened. Her body screamed for food. Her soul screamed for dignity. Inside her chest, her heart was breaking. But she stood there, frozen, unable to beg further, unable to obey. I can't, she whispered. Sandra's smile vanished. Then get out, she snapped. Get out of my restaurant, before the new CEO walks in and sees this mess. Judith's breath caught. New CEO? If only you knew, she thought bitterly. If only you knew who was standing in front of you. But she didn't speak. She didn't argue. Two security guards approached. They didn't hurt her, but their grip was firm. They escorted her out, past the silent tables, past the judging stares. She didn't look back. She didn't cry. Outside, she sat on a broken plastic chair by the restaurant wall. Her stomach twisted in pain. But her chest burned worse. The shame stung deeper than hunger. What no one inside knew, what Sandra certainly didn't know, was that Judith Anderson, the girl who had just been thrown out like trash, was the real owner of Benson's Food. She had arrived in Lagos the night before, straight from London. After the death of her father, Chief Anderson Henry, she had inherited everything. The estates, the cars, the companies, the restaurant chain, everything. But her father had taught her one thing. You'll never know a person's heart until they think you're beneath them. So Judith left her mansion that morning in disguise. She wore an old dress, rubbed dust on her skin, removed her makeup, let her hair go wild, walked alone, barefoot, no driver, no security. She had to know the truth. And now she knew it. Inside, the restaurant went back to business. Waiters served. Customers ate. Laughter returned. But not for one man. His name was Johnson. He had been mopping the far side of the restaurant when Judith first walked in. He saw the stares, the whispers, the laughter. He had seen Sandra lift her foot, and he had seen Judith break. He was the janitor. 30, quiet, unnoticed. His uniform was clean but faded. His shoes worn thin. His eyes gentle. Nobody in that room knew he had a university degree in accounting. Nobody cared. But Johnson cared. About decency. About kindness. He watched Judith through the window, sitting alone. Then he looked at the money in his pocket. Not much. Just enough to last until payday. Barely. He sighed, then walked to the counter. 1 plate of jollof rice, he said to the cashier. Add chicken. And bottled water. You sure? She asked. That's your last money, Johnson. I know. He paid. Pocket now empty. He walked outside. Judith looked up when she felt a soft tap. Johnson stood there, holding the plate and bottle. My name is Johnson, he said gently. I work here. I don't have much, but this is all I have today. Please eat. Don't mind what happened inside. Judith stared at him, eyes wide. Why? She whispered. Why would you help me? He shrugged slightly. Because you're human. Because you're hungry. Because that was wrong. Her eyes filled again, but not with shame this time. With something else. Thank you, she said. She ate slowly. Every bite felt like healing. Johnson sat beside her. Quiet. Present. When she finished, she turned. What's your name again? Johnson. And the woman inside? Sandra. She's the manager. Judith nodded. Can I have your phone number? He hesitated. My number? Please. He gave it. She wrote it down carefully. Folded the paper. Slipped it into her pocket. Then she stood up. Thank you, Johnson, for your kindness. And she walked away. At the end of the street, a black SUV was waiting. The driver opened the door. Welcome, Ma, he said. How did it go? Judith removed her slippers, took off the dusty gown, revealing a neat, simple dress underneath. She straightened her back. Her expression hardened. They failed, she said. She glanced back once at the restaurant. Her fingers tightened around the paper in her pocket. This is a small world, she whispered. And I'm done watching from far. The car pulled away. Tomorrow will be different. Judith sat quietly in the back seat of the black SUV, closed her eyes for a moment. The hum of the engine felt like a heartbeat, steady, reliable. Behind the tinted glass, Lagos rolled by without noticing her. But inside her, everything had changed. She thought of the restaurant last night. The faces, the mockery, the sneers. The smell of fear and shame. The high heel, Sandra's weapon, reflecting light like a dagger. And most painfully, the silence. Not a single soul rose to help. No hand outstretched, no word spoken. Until Johnson, a nameless janitor among dozens, unnoticed until that moment. He had mopped floors, wiped spills, scurried between tables. A specter. And yet he saw. He acted. He cared. He gave. Judith opened her eyes and stared out the window. That was the truth her father spoke of. The hearts hidden behind uniforms and polite smiles. And not just hearts, courage. Quiet, uncomfortable, costly courage. That had to be honored. Early the next morning, the sun hadn't yet broken free from the hills when she strode into the mansion's grand foyer. Her guards stood at attention, noble and silent. The house was clean, cold, and personal. But she didn't feel rich. She felt burdened, with duty, with expectation, with a heavy secret. She dropped into a leather chair, looked down at the paper in her hand, Johnson's number. It felt more precious than any stock certificate, more valuable than any estate deed. A reminder how low you had to go to see the truth. She called her assistant, and soon a driver brought her to the main branch of the very chain founded by her father. The vast glass building with the gold sign, Benson's Food. The early morning Lagos air was already warm, the city humming in the distance. As she walked through the staff gate, dressed in a crisp cream jumpsuit and heels instead of sandals, guards stepped aside respectfully. She felt their eyes flicker, trying to match her face from yesterday's newspaper stories to the clean, composed woman entering now. No one suspected what she had done. Inside the kitchen corridor, cooks stirred oil, woks hissed, aroma of fresh bread rose. The staff nodded politely as she passed. She nodded back. The silence was not hostile. It was neutral, professional. She entered the manager's office, sterile, bland, with a long glass table and a few plastic chairs. Behind the table sat 2 men wearing suits. They were middle management, men who liked numbers more than people. They looked up when she appeared. Their expressions were polite surprise. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm, controlled. "You might wonder why I called this meeting so early. Please sit down." They sat. Their pens hovered over blank notepads. My name is Judith Anderson, she began. I'm the owner of Benson's Food. After last night's events, I'm here to take charge, personally. Silence followed. One of the men cleared his throat. Pardon, Mrs. Anderson, but there was an incident yesterday. A beggar was asked to kiss a shoe. Mrs. Okafor did her duty under pressure from the floor's image concerns. He spoke cautiously, avoiding her eyes. Judith's mouth curved faintly. Mrs. Okafor asked a hungry woman, one likely without food for days, to lick her shoe, yes. She paused so the weight of the words sank in. That woman was me. In disguise. I wanted to see how we treat those we deem unworthy. I wanted to know who among you values dignity over reputation. Her calmness made the room colder. The two men exchanged glances. One swallowed. She was praying for leftovers. Not alms, just food left over. And what she got was public humiliation. By a manager. On my floor. Under my name. Judith stood. She spoke slow, measured. I cannot, will not allow that. She placed a hand on the table, fingers spread wide. I'm here until further notice. I will review staff. I will conduct interviews. I will know each of you by name, not by your uniform. We will restore dignity, or we will rebuild. The men nodded. Faces pale. Not defiant, not relieved. Just uncertain. Fear mixed with respect. She left the room. Her heels clicking on the marble floor sounded like a verdict. People parted. Staff stared. The hush that fell behind her was respectful, but heavy. Back in the lobby, she spotted him before he saw her. Johnson, mop in hand, fresh uniform, standing near the glass windows. He didn't change pace when he caught her eyes, just nodded silently. She walked over. Good morning. He stopped mid-mop. He stared. For a moment, she saw confusion in his eyes. Then recognition. Then something else. Hope. Or maybe relief. She didn't know. You don't have to mop today, she said gently. He shook his head. I don't know how to just stand when there's work to do. She smiled, a small, warm thing. You already did something today. Something that mattered. He lowered his head a little. Mop dripping. Thank you, ma'am. She held out her hand. I'll come back. Talk later. He nodded. He turned, went on with his work. But she felt the weight in the air around him, like corners of the kitchen had softened, like the chairs looked less cold. Before she left, she heard footsteps behind her. A woman dressed in the smart uniform of a floor supervisor, eyes wide, stupidly surprised. That must be Germaine. She whispered. Is it true? Did you really? She owned the place now? Judith didn't answer. She just walked past, heard the whisper behind her fade. She looks like a queen. But yesterday, she was begging. She paused, turned her head slightly, shoulders tall. The phantom of a smirk touched her lips. Some queens build their crowns while wearing rags. And she walked on. Late that night, Judith sat in the small private office at the back of the restaurant. The city lights filtered through the tall window. She opened her laptop. Her screen glowed with spreadsheets, staff rosters, branch performance charts. Under each name, she typed quietly, Johnson, probation pending. Then, Sandra Okafor, terminated. At the bottom, new code of conduct draft. She paused. On the desk beside the laptop, the little scrap of paper folded with Johnson's number. She picked it up, turned it over. She didn't know yet what would come tomorrow. She didn't know who would resist, who would leak stories, who would spread rumors. She didn't know if the chain would survive this cleansing. But she felt something else now. Something sharp, purposeful, alive. Not fear, not guilt, but control and resolve. She stood up, walked to the window. The city glowed, bright, restless, hungry, much like the girl she used to be, or pretended to be. A soft knock came at the door. Come in, she said. The door opened. Johnson stepped in. He stood still, awkward, not knowing whether to smile or bow. She gestured to a chair. Have a seat, she said quietly. He sat. She cleared her throat. Then she looked him in the eyes. Tomorrow morning, she began. You start as acting floor supervisor for branch number 3. I want you on the floor, to check service, but also to watch people, to lead. Her voice softened. Because you know what dignity means. Because you can see what others don't. And because I trust you. His eyes widened. His lips parted. For a moment, nothing. Then he swallowed. Ma, I don't know what to say. Then say nothing, she said gently. Just do what's right. He nodded, slowly, like a man waking from a long sleep. She closed her laptop. The city night pressed against the glass. She turned, walked out of the room, leaving the door open a crack. Light spilled into the corridor. She paused at the threshold, took a deep breath. Some people will panic. Others will fight. But the truth, like fire, burns brightest when it's under pressure. She closed the door, and silence followed. Next time, she would face the storm. The staff, the rumors, maybe even rebellion. But she wasn't afraid anymore, because she had walked barefoot through shame, and she had found a heart worth trusting, and a power worth wielding, not for pride, but for justice. Tomorrow would be different, indeed. Judith didn't sleep that night. She sat by her bedroom window, eyes wide open, replaying every second of the day in her head. The moment she stepped in her own restaurant, dressed in power instead of pain. The way people stared, the silence, the gasps, the way Sandra dropped to her knees, begging. But no apology could erase what happened the day before. Sandra had humiliated her, not knowing she was mocking the woman who signed her salary. Judith's heart ached, not just from what had been done to her, but from what it revealed. The staff, the fake smiles, the hidden cruelty, all of it had been there, hiding under uniforms and polite greetings. Her father had been right. In the morning, the city woke up as usual, noisy, restless, alive. But inside Benson's food, something had changed. The queen had arrived. Judith stepped into the restaurant again, this time flanked by two quiet guards in suits. She wore no makeup, but her face was fierce. Her black hair was pulled back neatly. Her cream jumpsuit was simple but elegant. There was nothing loud about her presence, but no one could ignore it. Customers froze mid-bite. Staff whispered. Some stared in disbelief. Others remembered. That's the girl from yesterday, but she's the owner? The real CEO? Sandra, who had arrived earlier to brag to her staff about how she put a dirty beggar in her place, was in the middle of giving instructions when she saw Judith walk in. Her face turned pale. The room seemed to spin. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Judith didn't look at her. Not yet. She walked to the center of the floor. Her heels clicked against the tiles. When she turned to face the staff, the room fell into total silence. Judith's voice was calm, clear, and without emotion. "This is a small world," she said, "and what happened yesterday didn't stay hidden." Gasps. "My name is Judith Anderson. I am the daughter of the late Chief Anderson Henry. And as of last week, I own Benson's Food." The restaurant broke into a storm of whispers. Sandra stepped forward slowly, her legs shaking. Ma, please. I didn't know it was you." Judith turned her eyes on her, cold, steady, unblinking. "That's the point," she said. "You didn't know. And because you didn't know, you thought you had the right to humiliate someone. Because you assumed they were beneath you." Sandra's voice cracked. "Please, I was just doing my job. Your job is to manage a restaurant, not crush dignity." Sandra dropped to her knees. "Please forgive me. I didn't mean it. I was stressed. There were so many customers. And that gave you permission to demand I kiss your shoes?" Judith's voice was sharp now. "To laugh as if I were a joke? To push me out like garbage?" Sandra wept, but no one moved to help her. Judith raised her hand slightly. Two guards stepped forward. "Escort her out. She is no longer an employee of this company." "Ma, please. I have a baby at home. I need this job," Sandra cried, grabbing the hem of Judith's jumpsuit. Judith pulled back. "You should have remembered that when you were forcing a hungry woman to lick your heels." The guards lifted Sandra gently but firmly. Her cries echoed through the restaurant as she was taken away. Judith turned to the staff, most of whom were frozen, stunned, wide-eyed. "But someone among you showed humanity," she said, voice softening. "When everyone else stood by, one man stepped forward. He gave me food. He sat beside me when I had nothing." Her eyes found Johnson. He stood in the corner, mop in hand, frozen. "Johnson," she said, "please come here." He stepped forward slowly, the mop still dripping. "Yesterday," Judith continued, "this man gave me his last money. He didn't know who I was. He just knew I was hungry." Johnson swallowed. I just did what anyone should do. No, Judith said. You did what most people won't. She turned to the staff and customers. From today forward, Johnson is no longer the janitor. He is the new manager of Benson's Food. Gasps. Murmurs. Applause. Johnson's eyes widened. He looked like someone had just told him the sky had fallen. Ma, I don't think I... You earned it, she said simply. And that was that. He stood there, shaking slightly, holding back tears. The restaurant buzzed with whispers. Some people clapped. A few customers stood. But Judith's eyes stayed calm, controlled, until a scream came from outside. The doors burst open. Sandra had broken free of the guards. Her hair was wild, eyes filled with rage. In her hand, a broken bottle. She rushed toward Judith like a storm. Everything happened in seconds. People screamed. Chairs crashed. Judith froze. But Johnson didn't. He stepped in front of her, fast, without thinking, and blocked Sandra's arm. The bottle scratched his forearm, blood trailing down. Two guards tackled Sandra to the ground. Let me go. She ruined me. She took everything. Sandra screamed as they dragged her back out. Judith rushed to Johnson. Are you okay? He winced but nodded. Just a scratch. You saved my life, she whispered. He smiled weakly. You saved mine yesterday. Their eyes met. In the middle of chaos, a strange quiet passed between them. A connection. And Judith knew something had changed. The next day, newspapers screamed. CEO Judith Anderson exposes cruel manager. Promotes janitor to manager after dramatic reveal. From mop to manager. The man who chose kindness. But Judith didn't care about headlines. She sat in her garden that evening, staring at the stars. And for the first time since her father's death, she felt peace. Though something told her this was only the beginning. 2 weeks passed. The air inside Benson's Food had changed. Lighter, warmer. Staff who once walked on eggshells now stood taller. Customers noticed too. The food tasted better, they said. Or maybe it was the feeling, the quiet dignity that returned to the place. Judith visited often, not as a queen inspecting her empire, but as someone watching something precious grow. And Johnson, now in his neat manager's shirt, his mop long gone, had become more than a story. He was a symbol. His calm voice guided the team. His old pain made him gentle. His discipline made him respected. His presence made everything feel possible. But something deeper was happening. Judith found herself watching him too long during meetings, waiting for his reactions, smiling when he entered the room. And Johnson? He tried not to feel anything. She was a CEO, a billionaire. He was still wearing second-hand shoes. But no matter how he tried to bury the feeling, it grew. They had dinners, always official at first, talking about operations, staff training, expansion. But each dinner ended with laughter. Inside jokes. Silence that didn't feel awkward. One night, at her mansion, Judith wore a simple black dress and no jewelry. Johnson came to deliver a quarterly report. He looked nervous. You look tired, he said softly, watching her rub her forehead. She smiled faintly. It's the spreadsheets. I think they're breeding when I sleep. He laughed gently. Do you like working here with me? She asked suddenly, quietly. His heart stumbled. Yes, he said, more than I've ever liked anything. She looked at him, and something changed. That night, they didn't speak of numbers. They talked about their pasts, their dreams, how Johnson once wanted to be a banker, how Judith once thought she'd be a writer, how both of them had been lonely for far too long. From that night, things were different. And a few months later, in a quiet garden under fairy lights, Johnson got down on one knee. Judith didn't blink, didn't hesitate. Yes, she said, her voice trembling. Yes, I will marry you. They cried. They laughed. They hugged. And for a while, the world felt perfect. Until Sandra came back. She had disappeared after the attack. The police said she was in custody, that she was being processed, that she wouldn't be a threat again. But Judith had a feeling in her bones that something unfinished was still out there. The night before the wedding, Johnson stayed at the small house Judith had gifted him. Not a mansion, but clean, private, peaceful. He paced the room, hanging his black suit on the wardrobe. He called Judith. Everything ready? He asked, smiling into the phone. I think so, she laughed. My hairdresser nearly fainted when I said I wanted something simple. He chuckled. Of course you did. There was a pause. Are you nervous? She asked softly. He looked out the window. No, he said. Just grateful. I can't wait to see you at the altar, she whispered. And I can't wait to say I do. They ended the call. He stepped outside to take out the trash. That's when it happened. A van screeched near the alley. A cloth was thrown over his head. Something hit the back of his skull. And everything went black. 9:30 p.m. Judith sat on her bed, staring at her wedding dress. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. A rough voice, quiet and menacing. He is with us. If you want him alive, tomorrow he must resign from Benson's Food. And cancel your wedding, or you will bury him instead. The line went dead. Her phone fell to the floor. Johnson, she called again. No answer. Again. Nothing. Panic rushed through her like cold water. She ran down the stairs barefoot. Her guards looked up in alarm. Call the police. Now. I want a trace on this number. He's missing. Within minutes, the mansion became a command center. Lights flicked on. Phones rang. Officers arrived. Judith's hands shook violently as she stood in the middle of it all. Please, she whispered to no one in particular. Please let him be alive. Johnson woke up in darkness. His hands were tied behind his back. His feet, too. His head throbbed. He smelled cement, dust, rotten air. A flashlight switched on. Sandra. Her face was thinner, her hair messier, her eyes wild. You took everything from me, she hissed. My job, my dignity, my life. And now you want to marry her? The same woman who destroyed me. Johnson's mouth was dry. Sandra, you need help. She laughed hollow. No, what I need is justice. She raised a wooden plank. You'll record a message. You'll resign. You'll break up with her, or I'll break your face. Two men grabbed him, held it down. He closed his eyes. He thought this was it. He thought this was how it ended. But then, a crash. Police. Shouting. Flashlights everywhere. Sandra Okafor. Drop your weapon. Officers tackled her. She screamed, kicked, fought. Judith ran into the room. Johnson. He looked up, dazed. Judith. She ran to him, untied the ropes with shaking fingers, pulled him into her arms. I thought I lost you, she whispered, crying into his neck. You didn't, he whispered back. You came. Sandra was dragged out, screaming. You'll regret this. Both of you. You ruined my life. I'll make you pay. But Judith wasn't listening. She was holding the man she loved. And that was all that mattered. The next morning, Judith stood in her wedding dress. She looked strong, beautiful, but inside she was shaking. Her aunt, Victoria, stood behind her, placing a soft hand on her shoulder. Life will test your joy, especially when something good is about to happen, she said gently. Judith nodded. Her voice was quiet but firm. Nothing will stop me from marrying him today. At the same time, Johnson dressed with the help of a detective watching over him for safety. He struggled with his bow tie. His hands still shook. You don't have to pretend you're okay, the officer said. Johnson exhaled. I just want to get to the part where I say I do. The wedding was held in one of the most elegant halls in Lagos. Crystal chandeliers, soft music, flowers everywhere. Guests filled the room. Business people, friends, restaurant staff, even customers who had become part of the journey. Johnson walked in. The crowd stood clapping. But he wasn't looking at them. He was looking for her. Then the doors opened. Judith stepped in. She looked like light, like grace, like strength that had survived a storm. People whispered, she's really marrying him. She almost lost him last night. She reached the altar. Johnson took her hands. His voice shook. I thought I lost you. You'll never lose me, she whispered. The ceremony began. Vows, tears, rings. Then, a loud boom outside. Screams. The building shook slightly. Guards ran. What was that? Judith cried, holding Johnson's arm tightly. An officer rushed in. It's okay. A generator outside backfired. No danger. Everyone exhaled. But Judith's heart didn't calm. She felt it again. That something was not over. And she was right. Because Sandra wasn't the only one with a grudge. The morning light that poured through Judith's mansion windows felt softer than usual, but it did little to quiet the storm in her mind. The night before had been beautiful chaotic and unforgettable. Her daughters were finally 5. The party had been perfect, but something inside her refused to relax. She couldn't explain it, just a feeling, a quiet knowing that something was not done. She watched from the balcony as the party staff cleaned the garden. Balloons half deflated. Wrappers littered the grass. The sound of children's laughter had faded, but the memory of it lingered like perfume. Johnson was inside, reading stories to the twins. Judith closed her eyes and tried to tell herself it was over. Sandra was gone. Justice had been served. Life had moved on. And yet, the man by the fence, the shadow, the way he had disappeared, her instincts had never lied to her before. 6 months earlier, Sandra had stood in a courtroom, wrists cuffed, eyes hollow. "I'm sorry," she said, barely able to lift her head. "I didn't mean to become this person." Judith had watched her, calm but not cold. The judge read the sentence. Life imprisonment. No parole. Sandra collapsed to her knees, screaming. Judith didn't flinch. But that night, when she was alone, she cried. Not for Sandra, but for how far a person could fall when no one stopped them. That was the last time she had expected to see her. And then came the birthday, the yellow taxi, the second-hand dress, the bowed head, and the quiet words. "Thank you for giving me a second chance." Sandra had changed. Judith believed that. And when she hugged her, she meant it. But not everyone leaves the past behind. Some inherit it. Some continue it. 2 days after the birthday party, Johnson received a message on his private line. No name, just a number, a location and a time. He showed it to Judith. She looked at it for a long moment. "Do you recognize it?" "No," Johnson said. "But I have a feeling we're meant to go." They didn't call security. They didn't alert the police. Not yet. They drove together in silence, crossing the bridge into an older part of Lagos. Narrow roads, tall fences, quiet corners. The address led to a compound. Faded paint, cracked walls, iron gate half open. They entered slowly. Inside, a man sat on a wooden chair under a rusted ceiling fan. He looked up when they approached. He had Sandra's eyes. "Sandra was my sister," he said. Judith nodded. Her hands tightened around the strap of her handbag. "I don't blame you for what happened to her," he continued. "She made her choices, paid for them. Then why are we here?" Johnson asked. The man didn't smile. "Because not everyone agrees with me." He handed Judith a file. Inside, surveillance photos. One of the restaurants in Port Harcourt. Another in Accra. A picture of Judith entering her car. A picture of Mimi and Mara walking with their nanny. Dates. Times. Judith's blood ran cold. "Who took these?" "My cousin. Sandra's ex-boyfriend. He blames you both for what happened. Says Sandra died in prison because of you." "She's alive," Johnson said. "Not to him. She died the day she went in. And he thinks you owe." Judith closed the file. "What does he want?" The man stood up. "To destroy what you built. Not with fire. With shame. With fear. Why are you warning us?" Johnson asked. The man hesitated, then said quietly, "Because Sandra told me about the day you forgave her, and it changed how I saw you." He paused. "Consider this your only warning." Back at the mansion, Judith called a full emergency meeting. Security was tightened. Guards were doubled. Staff were screened again. Surveillance expanded across all branches. Drivers changed. Routes randomized. The twins were withdrawn from public school and moved to a private tutor system. Johnson hated it. Judith hated it more. But safety was no longer a quiet prayer. It was policy. Still, the threat remained faceless. No name, no voice, only silence. 1 month passed. No attacks, no threats, until the envelope arrived. It was delivered to Johnson's office. No return address. Inside, a photo of Judith taken from behind. Walking alone, entering her car. A note written in black ink. "We don't forget. You shouldn't either." That night, Judith sat alone in the garden. The air smelled of jasmine and fire. She stared at the stars and wondered what her father would have done. She whispered to herself, "You told me to test their hearts, but you never told me what to do once I saw what's inside." She closed her eyes. She didn't want revenge. She wanted peace. But peace, like power, came with a price. And Judith Anderson was ready to pay it. 6 months later, nothing happened. The girls grew. The business flourished. The man in the shadows never returned. But Judith never walked anywhere alone again. The driver was always 10 steps behind. The guards never left the house unarmed. And the memory of what had nearly happened, what almost returned, stayed with her. Like a scar, a quiet, invisible one. If you've read this far, you already know this wasn't just a love story. It wasn't just a story of revenge or forgiveness. It was a test of character, of power, of heart. Now it's your turn. Did you feel for Judith? Would you have forgiven Sandra? And what would you do with a threat you can't see? If this story made you pause, made you think, or made you feel, then leave a comment. Share your thoughts. And subscribe to our channel for more stories that make silence feel loud. We're just getting started.